Our guest this half hour is City Manager, Mr. Andy Blake. Andy, how are you?
An entire half hour?
And 20-something minutes. We've wasted about two bantering, so we saved you a little bit on that.
You eventually get used to that applause. I mean, I did.
Right?
It took a while. You eventually get used to it.
I never get...
Way to go, Andy.
That intro never gets old for me because obviously Rob spent some time on that, so it makes me smile every time. It's obviously too good for me, but I'll take it.
Good morning.
Andy, let's get into it a little bit. There's been... some rumors, some scuttlebutt around that I've been hearing about these impact fees and whether they affect the city. And there's conflicting stories that I'm getting. Do these new impact fees affect the city? Do they not? If the county implements an impact fee, is the city affected by that?
Well, originally during these discussions, I think that it was never intended to apply within the city. As I think we discussed last time, Bill, the county and the city try to have a lot of chats between, administrators, the president, vice president. I don't think they ever intended to do that. I think recently they might have gotten some opinion or advice that maybe a certain portion of the fee maybe should. But I can tell you that we have not really, and I do not think, unless I'm mistaken, the Municipal League was this week, so we just got back into town. I don't think they took any action, or we haven't gotten any formal communication that the majority of the governing body, the county commission, has taken any action regarding that. So I can't really speak to whether or not they've decided to actually attempt to implement those fees in the city or not. But I'm sure that, they communicate pretty well with us. We try to communicate pretty well with them, that over the next week or two that they'll, discuss, take action within the chamber, and, we'll have ongoing discussions.
But as the rules are written, if they do apply to the city will reap the benefits. The money will come back in large part to the city.
I don't think so.
No, the county collects the fees, and it would go to whatever their capital improvement plan that they have.
But isn't there a geographic restriction of where they can be used for? It has to be in the proximity of where the development has been built?
I can only speak with experience in other places where I've worked about impact fees, but if you have a level of service area, for example, schools, for example, there's one level of service area, and that's the county. But here's the thing. Because we haven't been engaged necessarily in the process because we were under the impression that they didn't apply within the cities, I can't really speak to the details, and I'm really not trying to just, bluff the question.
Yeah.
I just haven't studied the details of the county's ordinance or the county's comprehensive plan or the county's capital plan or the county's consultant that base these fees upon. So I just can't speak to the details because, as you say, this kind of just
it's just become kind of talk,
right?
And it behind the scenes, right. and we don't know enough details.
Yeah, and I have not studied in detail either, Andy, but it's my impression that there are about, I think, 4 categories, maybe 5. The administrative fee would be broad, spread throughout the county where it was needed, but the other categories had to be targeted for the area in which the fees were collected.
Yeah, I can't speak to the details. You might be absolutely correct. Those are conversations that we'll be having. We have our own fire EMS. County has their own fire EMS, but neither the county nor the city have its own schools. So impact fees, historically can be complicated. The administration of them are complicated, and there's only a couple places in this state that even qualify under the Local Powers Act to even do it. So, this is kind of new territory, except for our neighbor to our east have had them for 20 years now.
Right. I'm going to assume that the city doesn't have the authority or the ability to impose impact fees themselves.
No, the statute under the Local Powers Act that was adopted by the legislature, I think in the early 2000s, say that counties impose impact fees, and it's conditioned upon, I believe, if my memory is correct, a building permit, a site improvement plan, or a use and occupancy certificate, all of which the county issues. And then we issue our own building permits through the city. We do have the ability to impose what's called a city service fee under Chapter 8 of the code. And we do have a community development fee that we impose on square footage of new residential to go towards capital improvement. So it's not as restrictive as impact fees, but it's just a different tool that the legislature has provided to cities.
So they also have to have like a comprehensive plan and so on and so forth for like a 10-year plan or something. Do you have that as well through the city?
The statute requires the city to have a comprehensive plan that has to be updated every 10 years.
The impact fees, to some degree, is in lieu of the home rule, which in effect the municipalities have a variance of home rule. The county does not have.
So the Local Powers Act it seems like the focus is always on the impact fee. But the Local Powers Act was actually in the early 2000s adopted in order to give growth counties more authority like cities do. I mean, the way the Constitution of West Virginia was set up and historically the statute, cities have always had more authority and power than the county. Mm-hmm. So when you have growth in your county, I think that some of the philosophy was provide those counties some of the same authorities and powers so they can deal with the increased urbanized population that put on the same setting and parallel as a city, if that makes sense. Impact fees always seem to be the focus of them, but there's other aspects in the Local Powers Act other than impact fees.
Andy, do we have growth in the city, and is there the ability to grow in the city? I mean, when I look at the city as a whole, and maybe I'm misinformed, I don't see where you could have multiple developments, or are there multiple developments being made in the city without having to grow the city limits?
Yes, I don't want to necessarily be quoted on the exact statistic, but I believe there's about 1,500 or more apartment units currently under either the planning or permitting stage right now.
Wow.
That includes a property that's in the city on Apple Harvest beside Baker Heights Fire Department. It includes a lot of the on the west side of I-81 between exits over with Gallery, the station,
13, yeah.
Delmar Orchard Road.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
8 and 13.
So I believe there's about 1,500. And then what happens is a lot of times, we have urban infill going on where sometimes you take, some lower density things that are replaced with higher density things. And of course, the Interwoven is a big infill project that is coming online actively, and that provided about 400 additional units. So your answer is yes, but it doesn't have as much territory, obviously, as the county.
Right. So you mentioned Interwoven. How far into that project are there, and how many actual habitable units are available now? I know there's going to be 500 eventually.
I think 400.
400 eventually. How many are actively rented, or how many have they renovated at this point?
I believe the last time I checked, around 100. They've already started their future phases. It's under construction. If you look at it, like I said, when it's complete.
And it looks fantastic, by the way.
If you haven't been in there, you should go.
Yeah.
I mean, the developer has done a fantastic job renovating, a very complicated project. And then, they were fortunate, and we're fortunate as a city and community, to get a new lease on a barbecue restaurant there on the frontage.
I did hear that.
Which will be a nice new addition, not only for those residents to be able to walk to, but the citizens abroad. So we're very excited about that.
Bill?
Yeah, I've not been tracking what's going on in the city that much, so I don't really know. Going back to the impact fees, did the county take action last time, or they deferred it for the implementation a couple so months down the road? They were going to take action to do implementation, but I thought they actually deferred it.
Again, I don't want to, maybe that was to the two mics. Yeah. I haven't really been keeping up with the process, not because I'm just not interested. There's enough going on in the city to keep me busy, and it was always the intent was, well, they didn't want to apply them in the city, so we just kind of...
It was never spoken about.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, and I don't think that was necessarily... I want to make it very clear. I don't think there was any evil motive, evil intent. Nothing like that. I don't want to say that. I don't want to cause any type of
and I was not
battle.
Yeah,
sure.
But let me shift to another subject. Last year, you did the sidewalks throughout the city, and you've done very major projects over the last 3 or 4 years. Do you have anything planned for the next year? comparable to the replacement of sidewalks or
Well, we have a big
continuation of
project.
sidewalks?
We've spoken about this before, and finally, we have the cooperative agreement that's been presented to us for our raised grant, which is also, like I said, a joint effort between the county and the city. It's a $20 million project to open up green space, the quarry, the trail. We are, this is stuff we try to do annually. We're getting ready to put out our annual paving bid. We've tried to dedicate at least $1 million a year to do that. We have a Safe Streets for All grant that's getting ready to take off. I mean, we're pretty busy, which is another reason why, I try not to focus on ancillary stuff until it deals with us, because we have enough going on. We've just hired we have and then there's stuff behind the scenes that's not the fancy stuff, but, internally we have transition going on within our staff. We have a brand new fire chief that we've promoted internally. We have a brand new finance director, because 2 long-term finance people have retired that was instrumental in the city. So again,
that grant that is moving forward, because
Yes,
I know there was when the Trump administration came in, there was some holdback of that. There was some worries. That is finally approved, and we are moving forward with that grant.
So the city, Federal Highways scheduled a kickoff meeting with the city. We had it. The ball is now in our court to fill out the new template, the model template, to get to a cooperative agreement with the feds, which will take some months to do.
Okay.
But I'm happy to say that the ball is moving forward, and that's going to be a pretty extensive, project. At the same time, you talk about growth and stuff like that. We constantly, have investors or developers that are looking at individual buildings, downtown. We're always happy to have those discussions. Some of these projects are complicated. They're old buildings, infill. And, it's not like taking a greenfield development, and, downtown redevelopment sometimes is complicated, and it just isn't, simple.
You talked about the project, or green space project, with the quarry. I'm assuming you're talking about Lake Thomas area.
Yes.
What about the quarry that's down in front of Martinsburg High? Is there any plans for that, or in or around that?
Not the moment. That's actually, except for the trail that goes by it. But
Sure.
There's no plans for
It's the Frog Hollow.
that, right?
Yeah.
And then Frog Hollow, of course, will connect to the extension of the Route 9 trail, that stops before the jail. And the ultimate goal is to go all the way to War Memorial Park.
And then what is the long-term plans for the Lake Thomas quarry?
Well, the Lake Thomas quarry, our first phase is to just open it up to the public. It's been 100 years. I'm trying to safely open it up to the public. Some of the design criteria is to try to make sure that if we open it up, that it's a safe, open space for the public to enjoy. But, eventually, hopefully, whether it's pavilions or whatever, but it's supposed to be passive recreation, not active recreation.
Okay.
It's 40 acres altogether with water and land, to just make it a passive, because it's, it's in the middle of a neighborhood. We want to respect the neighborhood, but at the same time, I think it's a real asset in the middle of town. I mean, most cities do not have just 40 acres with a body of water that you can make a public asset out of.
Now, Andy, I've not been to Lake Thomas, but most of these quarries are vertical, very steep walls, and water at the base. Is there going to be access to the water itself in Lake Thomas?
So in phase 1, so there's a few phases of this project. Eventually, we would love to be able to get people onto the water, whether or not being able to rent kayaks or whatever. Frankly, even to monetize something in order to help pay for the operations. I think that you see a quarry to our east in Harpers Ferry that now has a private sector, kind of amusement water attraction with slides and stuff like that. We haven't gotten to that point.
Are there roads down to the water?
There's like a old
ramp.
a ramp.
A ramp,
Yep,
okay.
a ramp. So you're right. There's some parts of it that's very steep, and there's some parts that aren't as steep, and that's what I was saying about the design of this, to keep people away from the steep part, allow people in the shallow part. I know that there's been a very, not that anyone's ever done it in this city. I know that there's a lot of interest in maybe fishing there, and
Andy, does the city get any of their drinking water or their water supply from Lake Thomas, or is that completely separate and not part of the equation?
completely separate. It would be difficult at the moment to mix surface water, which that is, with groundwater, the way our water treatment systems are set up. The city's water completely comes from 2 underground water sources.
Some of these quarries, you see this body of water and think there's quite a bit of water there, but the recharge is minimum. So if you pull down very much, then it's not able to recharge.
Yeah, I was just thinking of, I've visited S-Rock, or I don't know what it's called anymore, but that quarry and where they're blasting and getting their concrete, and that water goes up and down. They pump that thing. It seems to be recharged extremely well. So I was just wondering.
Well, I wasn't around 100 years ago, but I think one of the reasons why that was no longer, I think that somehow they lost control. And
right.
Actually, I think, and I've heard rumors that underneath that water might even be the old office, and I've been told that if the water gets low enough, you can see the peak of the roof.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So,
it might be a good scuba diving.
Well, and there is a quarry in Virginia that's what they've done. It's a scuba park, and that's where you can get certified and stuff like that. So
we're not the only city that has turned. I like to say that we're the pioneer in this, but we're not the only city that has turned a quarry into a park. Actually, one of Atlanta's biggest, I think their biggest public park now, and they just did it in the last decade, is a former quarry.
And how much does Maria Lawrenson have to do with changing this quarry and increasing her property value?
You see Maria out there with a little
because Maria's property backs right up to the quarry, right?
There's just some questions I'm just not going to answer, but Maria definitely has the bat phone line.
Yes.
But no, but she's been, for what it's worth, I've talked to her. She's been very supportive of the project.
Andy, what are some of the things we can look forward to, or what are some of the things that you look forward to, maybe from the legislature, or you're looking forward to over the next year within the city?
Well, we always like to work with our legislators. I say this all the time. If you look at the top 10 states with the highest GDP, their commonality is they have some of the strongest cities in the union. And I've always believed that strong cities make for a strong county and for a strong state. We want to be part of the economic engine. We're one of the, West Virginia is very small, but we are one of the top cities in the state. We want to try to be a leader. We want to try to work with you guys to develop policies to, generate more economic development, sustain, be able to take care of our employees that are doing all the hard work. It's very hard in this area just to stay up with competitive wages when we're competing with our surrounding states with, frankly, completely different tax bases than we're operating. Sure. Sometimes I feel like that we're competing on a West Virginia tax base in a Washington, D.C. labor market, which is really tough. It's really hard to get water operators. It's hard to get sewer operators. Our first responders, can go to, it's just like teachers. They can go to surrounding states. So, that's something that we always want to work with the legislature about. And then I'm just going to say this. I know that taxes and fees are never popular, but services cost, services unfortunately just cost money. And, growth is good, but growth also turns into additional services. So there's always that balance to make sure that you can be sustainable. And, I never want to ever try to write a letter to say, unfortunately, we have to lay off folks. That's the whole goal. So try to be conservative and, make sure that if we have a rainy day or a bad day that we're holding back, that we can try to get through it.
Does the city have a rainy day fund?
Yes, sir. We do.
You do? Mm-hmm. And that affects your bond rating? Is that kind of the same way as the state does?
I mean, the good news is the city has, other than water and sewer bonds, which is a separate fund, we have no debt, which is great. But, the water and sewer, you can't build $50 million water and sewer plants without carrying debt. It's just not possible.
And you say you have no debt. Is that usual amongst other cities or municipalities around the state, or are we an outlier that we have no debt and we're in pretty good financial shape?
I would say that we're an outlier. Over the last 3 years, not only have we been not carrying debt, but we've also tried to fix, I call it the big three: salaries, healthcare, property and liability insurance, all of the four, and pensions. And we've tried to, I might not see it, but my successor hopefully will one day, show that those items have been fixed for long-term financial strength. And I will say there's a lot of cities when they have to buy an ambulance or a truck or something like that, they have to lease purchase it because they don't have the money. I can say we have not been like that. I'm not saying that one of these days, it could happen. But I think we're very fortunate, and I actually thank my predecessors, both in the administration on the finance side, to being good stewards.
So we've got about 60 seconds left, Andy. Let's talk about chickens and bees within a municipality.
Okay.
Let me talk about something else if we can. I was going to say George Cares.
Yes.
Going to have his memorial this Saturday, and he did a lot for the city, and Andy and the current residents all benefiting from what George did.
Great man.
Well, now we can't talk about chickens and bees.
Thanks, Bill. I
for-
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I owe you now.
Yeah.
Kevin owes me. The mayor owes me. You owe me.
No,
I owe you.
Every mayor has made a contribution.
I agree.
Harriet did. Everybody's done a contribution. But I think George was a unique personality. He served with the city for so long. His heart and soul was the city. So
Absolutely, and I served with him in our Rotary Club for a long, long time. The man had a very genuine heart, and I'm glad that his Raleigh Street extension finally got through before he stepped down as mayor. So.
I just wish they would name it for him.
Right. Thank you, Andy, for coming in. We appreciate it. We're going to shout out to Kevin Knowles. Thanks, Kevin, for calling in and leaving us high and dry. It must have been something pretty serious because I know Kev loves to come in. You're listening to WNR. You're watching on TV 10. We'll be right back with the Friday 5 after this.